America has been torturing people since the 1950s in Iraq, in America, in Canada, in South America, everywhere pretty much. And today I want to speak about how the CIA basically developed the torture manual that would be used all over the world and how no one's really said anything. These tortures have just been bypassed and human rights laws can't really do anything about it. So how this all started is that America was sending soldiers off abroad, and these soldiers were being captured sometimes and being kept as prisoners of war. And they started recording videos of themselves saying that they hated America and that they hated imperialism and capitalism. And America was looking at this very shocked, like, how could our own soldiers go against us? Well, they must be being brainwashed by the enemy. How is the enemy brainwashing them so well that they're going against their own country? The CIA became really interested in this idea of brainwashing. So they gave some money to a psychiatrist called Ewen Cameron, who would do these really messed up experiments on these psychiatric patients who were being held for disorders such as depression or bipolar. And he would do really weird things like keep them in isolation for 100 days or electroshock them twice a day or block out any light for 3 months, things that completely disorientate the human brain. The reason that Ewen Cameron was trying to do this is that he thought that the way to cure these disorders was to create a blank slate. These patients are not given their permission to be used in this way. They were just psychiatric patients, and Ewen Cameron just kind of came in and did all this crazy stuff to them of the human mind. And by electroshocking people, by keeping them in isolation with no social contact, not seeing light, everything they had in their brain would be erased, and then a new human could kind of be built on top of that, so their old problem would just go away. He thought this was super clever because if he could get the person back to their childlike state, which is what electroshocking, keeping someone in isolation does, then he would be able to build on top of that. In addition, he would record himself speaking, saying a phrase such as, "You're an amazing brother and you will be kind to everyone." And he would put that specific phrase on record for days, for months, and the patient wouldn't have a break from it, so that he thought it would be drilled into their mind, but that's obviously not what happens. They instead go completely crazy. One patient had to listen to Ewen's voice for 101 days straight. And so the obvious side effects of all of this were, number one, complete memory loss, and number two, a childlike state. This is how these patients were acting after being tortured with these methods that he was using, that the CIA were funding him to do. And you're wondering why all this research is connected to the CIA. Well, the CIA was now interested in interrogation methods. Before, they were interested in keeping their soldiers safe and not being brainwashed, but now they realized that they could do the same thing to their own prisoners. They could brainwash them, they could interrogate them and get any information that they wanted from them. So this is where their incentive sort of came from. So Ewen Cameron was funded from about the mid-1950s till 1961 by the CIA, and then the funding was cut. But by then, the CIA had basically developed a manual containing all the interrogation techniques that all officers needed to know about. So you're wondering, how is America not seeing that this is all going on, that their main organization, the CIA, is literally funding a torture scheme? Well, they kind of found out a bit, a few years later, that this guy called Florencio Caballero, he revealed that him and 23 of his other colleagues that worked in the prison, they had been trained in Texas by CIA people about how to interrogate, about how to find the weaknesses of a prisoner, how to use those weaknesses. So if a prisoner doesn't like dogs, get a dog in the room, in a tiny room with him, to really frighten him so that he would be disorientated, etc. So after the US Senate found out that this had actually happened, that this guy and his 23 friends had been trained, they kind of got a bit involved, and they said, CIA, release the information that you have. We want to see what you're hiding. And they were refusing until they finally gave in. And they gave them this handbook called the Kubak Handbook. And it's basically a torture manual. It doesn't mention any human rights laws. It doesn't mention anything of, some sort of decency. It's all about electroshocking, how to get what you want, keeping people in isolation, electroshocking genitals. It's horrific. And this handbook has been used most notably to train people in South America during the 1970s and Iraqi officers, American officers in Iraq, in these horrific Iraq prisons. And the reason that this worked so well in Iraq is because, in general, human rights law says that even prisoners of war are subject to human rights law. They're not exempt from it. But George Bush, he made a law saying that the people that had been captured in Iraq were not prisoners of war, but they were enemy combatants. And enemy combatants didn't have the same human rights laws applied to them for some reason. And so a whole torture thing happened in Iraq because of that. And no human rights thing could really get involved because George Bush had made this stupid law. So overall, what he was trying to do, what the CIA in America were trying to do, is to completely, shock the brain so that everything it's known goes away. And I've gotten all my information from this really amazing book called The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. And if you're still watching, then maybe you're interested in this bit, that she thinks that the way that they were trying to shock individual people so that they could get them to think the way they think or to say the things that they wanted them to say, that's what America does on a larger scale with these shocks. So instead of a shock being an electroshock to a single human, a shock happens to a whole nation by a big event such as 9/11 or something, and that puts the brain in such a shock that people are able to take advantage of it, the same way that when the individuals have a shock, the interrogator is able to take advantage of it. And that's what this whole book is about. And she talks about Iraq extensively and other things, which is so good. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to be doing more specific torture videos on how torture was implemented in South America and how torture was implemented in Iraq. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.